All right, welcome everyone. Such a pleasure to have you here. I am going to take the bold step of unmasking since, as usual, no one wants to sit up front. And so the only people in direct range of me are all going out to dinner with me later. So they're taking their chances as it is. So we'll have a conversation and remask. Welcome everybody. Thanks for coming for this conversation with Fred Rosen, class of 1969. A couple of his classmates are here joining us. We are really thrilled to have them and to have you here to talk about Fred's life, career, advice, whatever else we might be able to draw out of him.
Okay.
Please. Oh, formal introduction.
No, everything's a plan.
Pardon my informality, please.
First off, I want to thank the Alumni Affairs Department for all of their hard work in putting today's event together. It's really exciting that we can all be here together in person. My name is Kara Anstey, and this is Barrett Smith. We are the co-presidents of Brooklyn's Entertainment and Sports Law Society. We are proud to welcome you to Dean Cahill's Q&A with alumnus Fred Rosen. Mr. Rosen was the president and CEO of Ticketmaster Group from 1982 to 1998. Under his leadership, Ticketmaster was transformed from a small startup ticketing company with under $1 million in annual ticket sales into the world's leading computerized ticketing service with a powerful global brand synonymous with ticketing, a pioneering internet presence, and more than $2.4 billion in annual ticket sales. Mr. Rosen has many other entrepreneurial and philanthropic pursuits over his career that I'm sure will be covered in today's Q&A. I will now hand it over to Dean Cahill, who will be moderating today's Q&A. Thank you all.
Well, as you can already tell, this is unscripted and unrehearsed. So a lively and freewheeling conversation to be had. So I think maybe we should begin at the beginning. And you can describe life before law school. I mean, there was, if you can call it living, there is life before law school. What led you to arrive here, and what was your story up until getting to Brooklyn Law School?
Well, you'd have to go back a long way. It's almost prehistoric. I was raised in the 50s and 60s, and life was in many ways simpler then. And so we were basically, it was right after World War II. Our parents moved to suburbs. We were all suburban kids, middle-class kids. Grandparents had all come over. We were all first-generation Americans. They had all immigrated here. Education was extremely important. So in the same way you knew you'd go to high school, you knew you'd go to college. There wasn't a great thought about that. It was where you would go. And for some reason, from the time I was 3 or 4, I always thought I'd go to law school. Don't ask me why, it was just in my head. And then I was never a great student, which is fairly obvious. But I managed to do okay. And I came to Brooklyn, and after my first year at Brooklyn, I took a year off because I wanted to go to business school. And I didn't think the law was the right place for me. And I was working for a law firm at the time who wouldn't let me quit, which was pretty interesting in terms of how your career changes. And he said, no, you work for me for a year, and then if you want to go to business school, you can. And I worked for him for a year, and then I came back to Brooklyn and finished my legal career and graduated in 1969. In June of 69, took the bar. And the only advice I'll give to you today is that when you take the bar, don't take it twice. Pass the first time. Lock yourself in a room. Don't let it talk to anyone, because I did it once. The gentleman here, Steve and Charles, were people, and that's my wife, who was gracious enough to come spend an hour and do this, because she's heard these stories before about 100 times. But we all studied for the bar. We all passed the first time. And if I give you anything to learn from today, is don't fool with it. Spend the time, do it once, get it out of your life, and then move on. because to take it more than once, it's like going to the dentist and having teeth pulled without Novocaine. So that's my only word to the wise. So I wound up being a lawyer.
So I say this was unscripted. This is one thing that Fred mentioned before in our conversation earlier, and I told him it wouldn't do any harm for him to repeat his advice about the bar exam and taking it seriously.
Right. So
So
that, you know, and then I practiced law in New York for 10 years, either myself individually, which is something in and of itself, or in small firms that I was a partner in. So I did practice law for 10 years, mostly corporate, mostly deals, some workout work. I've never been in a courtroom, except as a defendant. Which, for those of you who know somewhat of my career, when you run a company like Ticketmaster, I used to fill out credit card applications and put occupation defendant because you got sued a lot. But the reality was that that was an interesting journey. And I don't think I could have done some of the things I accomplished had I not gone to law school and gotten the keys. Law school is important in terms of giving the keys. What you do with the keys is entirely up to you. No one's career path is yours. Everyone, as I always say, has their own movie. So while you're here, I would take as much out of this school as you can, and then you'll decide what you need in practical, real world terms when you leave.
So I'm curious, I mean, people I'm sure are thinking of you as an entrepreneur by virtue of the way that you built and grew Ticketmaster, but having run your own firm before Ticketmaster, that's a form of entrepreneurialism too. What was it like having your own firm, and how did you find business? How did you even get started?
Well, what happened was when I graduated here in, I guess it was 69 is when I took the bar. And then I was gonna, actually I had applied to NYU to get my master's in corporate law and been accepted. And then my dad got sick and subsequently passed away. I went into a family business for a year and probably didn't do very well. And wound up selling the business at the end of 71, somewhere around September or October, gave the money to my mother. I had $10,000 in the bank, which I had saved. And the firm I had worked for who helped me through law school was not going to give me top dollar. So I said, hey, I got a client on a $500 a month retainer. I'll open an office, which shows both lack of judgment and basically the need not to work for anybody. And I've never worked for anybody, which is something that is kind of interesting. So I opened this office with another lawyer. We were in a room which we had a round table and a suite of lawyers. And I figured I wasn't married, I was single, and why not bet on myself? And clients came in strange places. I don't really know how they came. Somebody would give you $500, well, not give you, but he would give you a matter here for 500 or 1,000 or 2,000. And somehow in the first year, I wound up making like 25 grand. And I never looked back. I just said, well, we got a base. Every year you start again. I was able to get some, not retainers, but clients who kept giving me business, which ultimately over the years, I think in 78 or 79, I was approached by a medium-sized firm to run their corporate department. And they had 6 partners that wanted me to be the 7th, and democracy didn't really work for me. It's the best way to put it. Because I said to them, if I lose 6-1, who wins? And it was not a good answer. And I said, I'm really not partnership material, which you knew. And then at that point, there was, how do I put it? There was a situation that arose where a lawyer from another city was investing between $3 and $5 million in various companies, of which Ticketmaster was one. And through a series of serendipity, it's not worth going through how all of that happened, but serendipity plays a very big part in people's lives. Serendipity is when opportunities come to you that you don't expect. And then it's up to you to take advantage of it. And he said, you know, I'll put you on retainer to all of these companies, and you meet me once a month and tell me what's going on. Ticketmaster was one of them. I did that for about 2 years, as well as have a practice. And I guess I had a partner in name only, and we had like, I guess, 3 or 4 people working for us. And the company ran out of money, and in early '82, or was going to run out of money. And he said, I think I'm going to close it. And I said, I don't want you to close it. I think I can make this company work. I want you to give me an opportunity to go raise the money and buy it. And I called a friend of mine from an office in Chicago, and I said, I have this idea, which may die of loneliness, but I'd like you to come and spend some time with me and talk me out of doing this. And he didn't talk me out of doing it. And so in the fall of '82, September 1st or October 1st, I can't remember, I got the company financed and became the CEO of Ticketmaster, which at that time was a small little ticket company trying to figure out if it could even survive in the world. And most people, when I did that, most of my friends thought that whatever intelligence I had left the room. And then when I told them I was moving to California in early '83, they definitely thought whatever intelligence was left the room. And when we went to California, this is one of those moments of, this true story, you could not make this up. So we had a foothold in Chicago, could not get arrested in New York, because you needed a certain amount of inventory to put together a system, because in those days the internet didn't exist and you needed data centers and outlets and phones. And someone called me up in December of '82 and said, Steve Wozniak is doing the US Festival, which was sort of like a forerunner to Coachella. You all know Coachella. Most of you never heard of the US Festival. The US Festival was 3 days in San Bernardino. And they said, and he's looking for another ticket company because he hates Ticketron. And then here was the snapper. He didn't want to use computerized tickets. Think of that in the process of how insane can that be? And I said, well, that's interesting. That's on my roadmap, because we had a roadmap to get to California in 1985. And he said, no, you don't understand, like April 1st next year. And so I go out to California, and if you're from New York, California is a strange land. I mean, it's a different place, right? And I commuted back and forth for about 5 weeks. And even though I was in my late 30s or early 40s, commuting back and forth across coast is tough. I said, I think it's time to go to California. And we made the deal where Wozniak spent $1 million promoting the US Festival, which our logo in the ads. So I thought that was a free bit to do that. We needed a data center, and there was a company called Rexon, which went out of business in '82, I think. And they had a place in Koreatown that had an office that looked like it was a wreck, but we took it because it had a data center with Halon, and we signed 2 leases, one for 6 months and one for 5 years, because we didn't know if it would work. And in 6 months, I wound up with half the inventory in Southern California. And I said, I think I better learn how to run a business. And that's when I learned where all the money was, how to run these things operationally, where I started to change when we started signing contracts, which are extremely important. Because the contracts that you may have read, did you give them the case? Did they see the case?
No, but I will be happy to get into that.
The contracts that we used came out of my head. Terms that were key, which were the financial terms, and what we needed, length of time, raises, all the dynamics that went with that, came because I understood from practicing law what that meant. Ticketron in those days would do this. They would say, we'll give you a 5-year contract, but all raises have to be mutually agreed to. And then you'd sit with the clients who are the arenas and theaters, and they go, well, we never give them a raise because we always pick a fight when they come to do this. So basically, if you have a 1-year contract that requires mutual consent, even though it says 5 years, it's a 1-year contract. So being a lawyer, I went, we're not doing that. one negotiation. Raises are all built in. We don't have discussions about that. And I changed how people looked at the world. And I changed things that I'm sure some of you resent, which is service charges and pricing. But let me just share something with you that I learned the first week I was doing this. Nobody pays more for a ticket than they want. This is not housing. This isn't food. This isn't about life. This is about enjoyment. If you don't want to pay the price, don't go. It's really simple. And in those days, I didn't have a hearing aid, not that I have one now, but when people would complain, I just shut it off. So the dynamic underneath that was we created a world that worked. But under that world, I said, look, if you want to have a relationship and we're going to be in business for 3 to 5 years, we can't keep talking about money. You talk about money once when you negotiate the contract. Then everything else is automatic. And if you want to make it work, you have to have a commitment to make it work. We're a service company. We're a marketing company. Public was never our client. The buildings were our client. And underneath that dynamic, which I understood probably from being a lawyer, was that those contracts were the key to how you build a business. Now, one thing I want to bring up, because I'm sure you all had the discussion about exclusives, and exclusives kept competition from being in the marketplace. Well, that wasn't why we had exclusives at the beginning. If you took an allocation, it's no different than buying a Gillette razor. Why do you go to CVS instead of Walgreens? What's ever convenient? So if somebody's been in business for 25 years and you've been in business for 25 minutes, what's going to make somebody come to you if you take an allocation? But if you're the only place to get Elton John tickets, they're going to find out pretty quickly who you are. So exclusives were driven from a marketing edge, not a competitive edge, because when you had no business and you were losing millions of dollars a year, it was absurd to think that we did that to keep competition out. So exclusives were also built on the fact that every arena, theater, stadium is built that everything in that facility is an exclusive. Parking, food, concessions, you name it. And I didn't understand why ticketing wasn't a concessionaire also. So I looked at this from a perspective of this is a business. This isn't a crusade. If you spend $100 or $80 to go to a Broadway show, why is going to a concert for $15 make any sense? So over the years, it evolved into golden circles and evolved into all kinds of different dynamics before the internet came. And underneath that was a very simple principle, making it really easy for the public to get tickets with a cost. Because when I got in the business, 70 to 80% of all concert tickets were sold at the arena. That didn't make any sense to me. Nobody lives near an arena. So by creating the outlet network, creating big phone banks and phone facilities, we did that. So if you look at what Ticketmaster's success was at the beginning, it was driven by two levels. You would not have gotten in the room without understanding the contractual nature of the business you had. You needed law for that. Instinctively, you needed to be entrepreneurial to figure out what did the person across the table need from you. And if you could put those two things together, you could build a business. And that's how I kind of looked at the world.
So I'm sure when you were running your own law firm, you probably found out that in addition to being a good lawyer, you had to know something about how to be a good business person, because you had to find your own clients, you had to figure out how to make them pay and what to charge them and all that other stuff.
Well, you had to pay rent, and
Yeah.
you had to pay, you had secretarial help, and you had bookkeepers, and you had associates. And you learn early on that it's better to have more money coming in than going out. And then you had to pay things, like your own life, which was rent. And look, in the sense of when I started this, let me be clear, I could have failed. There was nothing that said you're going to succeed. And I was looking at various quotes, and I lost the quote I wanted from someone, but the quote goes something like this, and different people have said it. If you're afraid to fail, you'll never have the ability to succeed. You have to have the ability to take risk. And that doesn't mean that you all will take risk. I had the benefit in my career of hiring lawyers from the best firms and the best schools. And they would say to me, how'd you do this? And what made them great lawyers doesn't give them the same risk profile I was willing to accept. Entrepreneurs accept risk. They accept the fact that you're facing a tree trunk with a saw and are probably going to fall down. And it's not how many times you fall, it's how many times you get up. So, the pure lawyers, the people who I respected the most, didn't have that kind of risk profile, but they're also great lawyers. And you could use different people for different things. And in my career, I think I spent about $40 million on lawyers. So, the reality is that I can, when I once got called for a jury, which I've never been on any jury because I always get dismissed. One of the great lines was, they said they're doing the voir dire, and they go, how many of you have been a plaintiff? I've been a plaintiff more than 5 times, 10 times, defendant. So the lawyer looks at me and he says, so you'd know a good lawyer from a bad one? I go, in a heartbeat. He said, dismissed. So, I mean, that's part of the dynamic of what you get with the experiences I've had.
So building on that theme of making choices about risk, I mean, I want to talk to you in a minute about the details of the contracts and what led you to enter into certain arrangements and how that really grew the business. But just entering into the business involved a decision that you saw promise in Ticketmaster, which was a business that was not doing very well. What led you to think that that was an opportunity? Did you know already that the opportunity was there to strike deals with venues, or did it just sort of evolve? What made you think this was a risk worth taking?
I'll try and capsule it. When I was doing work for that attorney, we owned a minority interest in a company in Houston, which was, we owned 10 or 12% of the Ticketmaster. They would sell licenses to cities or to territories. So, I mean, they had a marketing program. The first marketing program was like El Paso. It was either Norway, El Paso, and somewhere else in Europe, none of which made sense. They were selling keys basically to the software. And I thought the software business was stupid. I thought you should be in the ticket business. So we owned, I think, 8 or 12% of this company in Houston that had, anybody from Houston here? Anybody from Texas here? You know Pace? You ever hear of Pace? Yeah. They were the big concert promoter. And Pace, the Houston Astrodome, the Summit, Ticketmaster, and a couple of other people all owned 100% of the ticket company in Houston. And the way they created this dynamic was they required unanimous consent to get anything done. You won't remember this because I don't think most of you were born, but in 1981, 82, Prime was 20%, 22%. And so everybody had borrowed their share. They took a $600,000 system, marked it up to $1.7 million. Everybody put up their share in irrevocable letters of credit. So you're paying 23% on your money, on your borrowings. Because they all hated each other, they were giving inventory to Ticketron, which is the other ticket company. And so they still had, as a group, 60 or 65% of the inventory in Houston. And when you were looking at their EBITDA, they were still making money, even at 23%. And they're all sitting in a room complaining. And I'm sitting in the room going, I think I'm living in an alien life. Is anybody looking at the same numbers I am? And I told the dean a story. I'm sitting in a room and I'm going, I don't understand why nobody wanted to raise service charges. You can't do that, you can't do this. I was told every reason you can't do anything. So I said, well, let's take the Houston Rockets. They have $40 tickets and the service charge is $1. And they went, yeah, but they have $5 tickets. So I said, well, why can't you make dollar charge $5, make the $5 ticket a $1 service charge and the $40 ticket a $2 service charge? And they said the magic words, you can't do that. And I said, was that one of the tablets Moses dropped? Which was not met with the same laughter that just, I thought it was funny, but they didn't think it was funny. But I walked out of that meeting and this is what it said to me. It said 3 or 4 things. It said, this is a gold mine if someone can run it. 2 is, this is not going to be a democracy. It's going to be, I'm going to have total control. And 3 is, if you can build these relationships the right way and change the models. Models are not one service charge fits all, multiple service charges on the same event, multiple service charges for different events. Just look at this as a business. And I cannot tell you how many people told me in the early 80s that tickets were not a business? And I'd walk out of rooms going, I think I'm living in an alternative universe. Now, I did lose money for 3 years because it takes time to burn stuff in and you've got to get inventory and it's the law of big numbers. But the truth was, instinctively, and then from the models that I would make myself, once you cross that moment of volume, you'd have a real business. And what you started to do as you go to a marketplace and they go, well, we want you to share inventory. And I go, I don't do that. I just don't do that. And what nobody talks about is what was weird about the ticket business was that there was never more than one ticket company in any city for the most part. Even if anybody here from Florida, there were 2 ticket companies in Florida, one in the north, one in the south. I think it was Bass was in the north, or Selected Seat was in the north and Bass was in the south. So everybody had like unnamed territories, like spheres of interest, like the old, European, when they would, right? And I went, this is nuts. And I bought 30 companies and I didn't pay more than $4 million for any of them. Nobody knew what anything was worth. And the reality is you put all this together and then all of a sudden you're looking at something that has a national footprint. What everybody forgets is that 99% of all tickets, except for the Grateful Dead when they were touring, are sold in the marketplace that exists. So nobody pays to see Elton John in Chicago if you live in New York or if you live in California. Everything is local market driven. And so I said, if I can get my hands on this company and do the things I want to do. And by the way, you'd sit in a room and I cannot tell you how many times I heard, well, we don't do that, or you can't do that, or that doesn't exist, or you're not allowed to do that. I'd go, why not? And that was kind of the dynamic. And look, to be fair, because my friends and my wife are here, everybody knows this about me. I know I'm slightly one-off. I see the world slightly differently. I'm not afraid of that. Not everybody can do this. Everybody's got to make their own journey. So you get comfortable in your own skin. You recognize that when you start to do things and change the world, you're going to aggravate people and people get angry. People get really mad and you have to be able to live with that. And then in the end, sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. But the dynamic was the underlying economic model was there and no one saw it. And we saw that and we took advantage of it and built it.
And it seems like part of that is that you were coming as a bit of an outsider to this world and you saw the product differently from how they did. You saw the pricing opportunities differently from how they did.
Think of this, because I'm not trying to put myself on this kind of level, but it speaks volumes. In the music business, everything was kind of locked in a certain way. Who did computer music at 99 cents? Steve Jobs. All the people in the ticket business who were all there, who all were there ahead of me, none of them did it. You came from the outside, you looked at the world differently and you said, this can work. And this is what happened. This is not a joke. Once you saw it work and people follow you. So you made it work in LA. You buy about 6 or 7 companies. I bought a company in New York. And then you start to close the country and it's like an accordion. You start to put it together. None of this is in books. I don't write like that because a lot of the stories don't make people look very smart. And I don't think you should make money by or take advantage of people who gave you great opportunities. So you saw that. It was really simple execution. And it was sort of like Vince Lombardi football. It's like there was nothing magic about what we did. And these are some of the thoughts that I had, which were not a joke. People said, you're in the ticket business. No, I'm in the real estate business. Who said that? Ray Kroc. They said he was never in the hamburger business. If he put a hamburger stand on every corner, then you buy his hamburger. My theory is if I had exclusives with every arena, they're going to buy tickets from me. Wasn't rocket science. And then what you started doing is people started making money. And then Joe would talk to Ann, who would talk to Peter, who would talk to Susie. And they go, when can we see you? When can we do this? When can we do that? And then there was a period, probably from 85 to 90, because I was not, as my wife said, I'm never going to get a Mary Poppins award. All I had to do was announce I was opening in a market, and people would call me up and they'd sell their business to me. They didn't even want to deal with it. So you had this benefit of really understanding the business and understanding the implications of what you could do with it. But to do that, it's not done at 40,000 feet. It's granular. You learn where every part of the business is. And in '83, when I was in California and I said, okay, I'm going to be here, I did every job in the company. I knew what everybody did. I spent the time. And I know this will sound funny, all work is holy. And I don't mean holy like religious holy, but it's valid. You want to be a cab driver, be the best cab driver you can. You want to be a doorman, be the best doorman you can. You want to be a lawyer, be the best lawyer you can, to the best of your ability. Look in the mirror. Everything you get in life is from looking in the mirror, good, bad, or indifferent. I've always believed that. That's what I preach to the people who work for me. Most important capital in a business is human capital. You make people evolve, then you've accomplished something that's even more dramatic than dollars and cents. And the thing that I'm proudest of is I didn't have people who went to the best schools because nobody knew what Ticketmaster was. So in the first couple of years, I had prison guards. I had people who went to schools that you would all probably laugh at. I took 40 to 50 of them who started between 30 and 50 grand and made them all millionaires. But leadership does that. And the ability to teach people to be better. And today, I don't know how it works in the world of millennials. I'd probably be in jail because I raised my voice. Men and women were treated the same. Salaries were the same. We didn't discriminate because of that. I put domestic partner insurance in Ticketmaster in '91 because I thought what was really important was protecting your people. And I told them one thing, I'm the toughest person you see in a day. After me, it's easy. You know, in today's world, I'd probably be in human resources 3 times a week. But the reality was you took these people and made them successful and gave them careers in life. Can't do that today. Today is a whole different dynamic of what's acceptable and what isn't. Because if you raise your voice to go, he yelled at me, good luck. So I'm at the wrong side of that career. But you know, the reality is that look at what was accomplished and look who accomplished it. And while I get the credit, it's all about the people who worked for me and did the work. And the reality is you can't be in, you know, you may start with 25 people. When you end up with 5,000 and you're all around the world, it's not only you. And you got to think about that.
It's not only you, but it was partly you. And you know,
Well, you set the tone.
yes.
The tone is set by you. And there was a perfect, I'll give you one perfect example. And this is how people resonate. We had a contract, and it's not important who it was, but it was a major facility in Los Angeles. And he was, the guy who ran it was beating up my head of operations. And I really mean being really abusive to him. You took advantage of me, Fred took advantage of me, I didn't understand what we were walking into, all the stuff that you can use sitting across the table. So I called him up. Because my theory is no one's allowed to beat you up at me, so he doesn't get to play. And I called him up, and I met him in his office, and I took the contract. It was a 5-year contract. I threw it on his desk. He said, what's that? I said, my contract with you, rip it up. He said, what do you mean? I said, rip it up. You think I sold you a bill of goods? Rip it up. He said, no, I don't want to rip it up. I said, well, then we're going to have a new set of game. You want to yell at anybody? You yell at me. You leave my people alone. You're not allowed to attack my people. I don't attack yours, okay? You can't attack mine. You got something to say? You can find me. And in the end, you think that doesn't go through a workforce? You think people don't recognize all of that? And I would have ripped up the contract. I said to him, I'll stay here till you find another ticket company, but this level of abuse, I will not stand for. Okay? I won't stand for it. And it's unacceptable to me. I can beat him up. You can't. You got an issue, you take it to me. And then after that, we never had a problem and the contract stayed and was renewed for another 10 years. But the point is this, that's what leaders do. That's what people sit in a room, you protect your people. I don't know how, candidly, I don't know how it works in today's world. And I'm not sure that you could get away with some of that stuff. But that's what happened and that's what helped build the company.
So that's a story of a less than positive relationship. But let me ask about the more positive things that you generated in your relationships with these venues, because this is where your legal expertise came in, was in forming these relationships
Right.
and understanding how to contract with them.
Right.
And as you noted earlier, and as may not be intuitive to people who have seen Ticketmaster from a different angle, your relationship isn't directly with the consumer, it's with venues.
Correct.
Right? You built this business by entering into relationships with
Right.
Event venues. So maybe you could explain, for the benefit of these lawyers in the making, how your legal expertise helped you think about the terms that you wanted to enter into and the nature of the relationship that you wanted to enter into with these venues.
Okay, fair. Among things you wanted, multi-year contracts. Important to have multi-year contracts. My view of contracts is this: if anybody ever called you and referred to a contract, you didn't have a good relationship with them. The only thing that counted in those contracts to me was the money. Where were the raises? So you needed multi-year contracts. You needed raises built into the contracts. You needed what your commitment in terms of writing software for them was. You can never negotiate a deal really well until you put yourself in the place of the person you're sitting across the table from. Because you have to give them what they need, which is not a joke. In other words, you have to give them, this is something to remember. Almost everybody I dealt with, unless they owned the team, was salaried. They report to somebody. You can't put employees in harm's way. You just can't. So you have to try to figure out, what do they need? How do they handle it? What's important to them? Because they go back and they report to people who they have to answer to. So you have to think about those things when you prepare an agreement. And in terms of agreements, what you want to do is make these agreements living so that fundamentally nobody ever looks at them. And what's always interesting is that after the lawyers write something, 4 years later, both of you are working on a set of dynamics that the contract doesn't even call for. Because contracts live. Contracts are animate. And in the end, they evolve. So what you do is when the contracts come up, you go, well, that's not germane anymore. Let's do this, or let's do that. And one of my favorite stories is the Forum in Los Angeles, which was replaced by the Staples. So with a series of weird circumstances, we wind up negotiating that contract while they're moving equipment in upstairs, because Ticketron was going to pull out and wasn't going to honor the amount of time they needed to leave. So I'm sitting there with the president of the Forum, and we've got these contracts in front of us, and we're doing hand markings. And you've seen hand markings in agreements, right? But we don't have the time to get them retyped because a show is going on sale 2 days later. So we signed this 3-year contract. Now we're in business. And Lou would call me up a year later, or a year and a half later, and go, Fred, I was looking at the contract. I don't quite understand what we meant when we wrote this. And I'd say to him, what do you want it to mean? And he said, what does that mean? I said, whatever you want it to mean is fine. Oh, okay. How do you want to handle that? Why make an issue of something not important? You made the deal for dollars. Don't worry about the nickels. And so in the end, we'd sit in a room and we'd go, do you think it could mean this? I said, it'll only mean this if you want it to mean that. Oh, okay. Well, then I want to do this. I go, fine. And you go, oh. And then, he stayed a client for 18 years. There are perspectives that you have to deal with, which are common sense. You can't write that into a contract. You can't write that in law school. How you deal with the people across from you. Think about this in terms of what you don't see. You're an arena. None of you are arenas, but you own an arena. Who's the only company you deal with on a daily basis in an arena? Ticket company. Food company, you don't serve them food 365 days a year. You're not cleaning the place 365 days a year. Your concessionaire isn't there 365 days a year, and you don't have events 365 days a year. But you sell tickets every day. And when you're home watching games on Christmas or on New Year's, somebody's in that box office letting people go to those events. And that means somebody's in the data center to make sure that those computers are working. or the internet is working, or whatever the problems are. Things you don't see that are invisible. So one of the things that I would say to them is, who do you deal with 365 days a year? And they would look at me and go, I don't know what you're talking about. You go, well, who do you deal with? Who's here every day? And if you give me a 1-year contract, you have no reason to make it work. You can always, it's the sword of Damocles. If I sneeze the wrong way, you're going to take it away from me. But if you have a 3 to 5 year contract, then you got to make it work because we have a partnership. And I take the heat for you. So one of the classic stories that I tell is I'm talking to some arena down south, and I call, because I would call my top 50 arenas every couple of weeks, to make sure if I didn't hear from them, I would talk to them, because everything's about relationships and keeping people connected. And I said to him, you sound terrible. You sound like your dog died. What happened? He said, well, I had to give away the rent to get the act, and got to go tell the mayor, because in those days there were more municipal buildings than private buildings, and I don't want to go tell the mayor. And I go, well, how much do you need? He tells me, and I said, well, I'll give it to you. He said, how are you going to give it to me? I said, well, I'll just go raise the service charges $3 or $4, and I'll give you your money, and I'll get some extra. He goes, great, no problem. So we do that, and then some music writer calls him up and says, how come the service charges were $3 more for this event than others? And the building manager goes, oh, those people in Los Angeles, I got to keep an eye on them. But you never lost a client. So in the world of Kabuki theater, you'd always see, oh, we got to keep an eye on those Ticketmaster people. We don't like them, but you need to understand something. It was a partnership. Nothing happened unless they approved it, and you got to take the heat. And my view was, I'll take the heat as long as I get the money. I mean, it was a really simple dynamic. And when I explain that to you, it's easy to understand, but from the outside, you don't see that. Nobody understands the dynamic. And why a service charge is different, it's a function of greed. It's a function of what buildings want. So when you negotiate with a building and you'd say, where are the service charges? Here's how this starts. I need X. X gets me a 20 to 25% bottom line. I don't do this for nothing, okay? That's what I need. How much money would you like to make? You control what goes on top of what I make. So you tell me what you want. So when you see these wild service charges, or you see numbers that don't make sense, it depends who's being cut into the process. And today, because this is totally different, when I did it and when I built it, the only people in the splitting the money of service charges was myself, the arena, and the promoter. That was all. Today, the acts are all sharing in all this stuff. StubHub secondary market is almost as big as the primary market, and no one pays more for a ticket than they want. And proof of that, which I thought was really hysterical, is when Milwaukee, I saw this article, when Milwaukee was playing the 6th game of the NBA playoffs, right? There's this article that said ticket prices have never been higher for any Bucks game. Well, how many 6 games are there where you can win the championship, right? The marketplace sets the rules, right? Not the ticket companies, not the promoters. In the end, we kind of put a floor to it, and then the marketplace kind of evolves. And the way golden circles happen, I'll tell you how golden circles happen. That was when you would, in the old days, they'd have one price from the first row to the last row, and then they could figure out why they were scalping, because I can't tell you how many times I've been in schools where people said they put themselves through school by scalping tickets. They go online, get 4 concert tickets, and then go to the secondary market in the old days and sell them. So the dynamic was really simple. I said, look, let's say row A is $100 and row Z is 50. And they'd say, where does the golden circle end? And I go, when people stop buying. So if you go to row Y, that's the end of the golden circle. And they go, well, what happens if it stops at row M? I go, then you do the following. You move Z up and M back until they meet in the middle. So what you do is you change it and you bring the second price up forward. And they looked at me, and you have to realize how unsophisticated they were in those days. And this is only 30 years ago. They go, can you do that? We go, it's a computer. I mean, that was like new to them because they didn't understand the tools they had, they could do and work with that dynamic. And that changed the business. And the other side to it was this. You can all do some research. There was a place called the Westchester Premier Theater, which had rows that didn't exist. Manifests had rows that didn't exist. Things that Ticketmaster did that none of you know: accurate audits, real counts, understanding how you can roll from one show into another show. It changed the business in the sense that it made music a business. Came with a cost. But the reality was, artists did better. I mean, in the billions of dollars we processed, nobody ever audited us. No one ever questioned our numbers or questioned the way we went about our business. And I think that was a tribute to the people who created that.
So I want to give some of the people in our audience an opportunity to ask questions. If they, we have a roving microphone here, Michael Akari. Wave the microphone more so they can see it. There's the roving microphone, which we will bring to you if you have a question. I'm happy to talk further, but if any of you have a question on your mind, feel free to dive in, all the way up front.
And don't be afraid, I won't bite.
Thank you for speaking with us. So my question sort of goes back 20, 30 minutes to when you were discussing making those first contracts with these venues or whoever you were working with. And the legal background helped with the beginning, but you seem to have such a robust understanding of the whole, I mean, relationship included, but the whole business of that. I'm curious, as someone who's looking down the deal road as an attorney, what's the path best travel to gain such a robust understanding of the world that you're stepping into?
Because that's a really good question. I didn't come into that world knowing anything. I had been in a number of meetings in Houston, in a number of other places. You know, without being funny, I gravitate. I cannot explain why, but I gravitated to this. I kept looking at this and going, and by the way, I've been wrong. Let me be clear. Not everything I've done in my life worked, so let's be candid about that. Sometimes you're wrong too. But I had an instinctive understanding that if left alone and I could sit in a room and sell this, I could make people believe. To give you some idea of how archaic stuff was, Ticketron had two systems, one for season tickets, one for single tickets, and the boxes didn't talk to each other. Try to think about that. So you had to take allocations, and they would take allocations, and you're all too young to remember that. They would be like in the outfield, or you'd see no seats sold, and then you'd see this section, which I thought was infinitely stupid. Because why would anybody come to you if they don't know where they're going to sit? And I thought best available seat made sense. And what the kids at Arizona State who initially developed this, they had one integrated system, which all of you would be shocked because that's obvious. You have season tickets, single tickets, groups, all on one integrated system. That didn't exist in '82. It just wasn't there. No one thought about it like that. There were a lot of marginal companies floating around. Well, probably about 15 companies, not unlike Ticketmaster, none that you ever heard of, that were floating around at the time. But the thinking was, because Ticketron's thinking was this, it was $1 a ticket service charge, because they saw themselves as a utility, right? And I saw ourselves as a marketing company. Create a distribution system, create big phone banks. You can't buy tickets on the phone if no one can get through. So if you walk into an arena and you go, where's your phone room? And they take you and they show you a black phone with two lines. You know, who can get through? You said nobody buys tickets by phone, so we don't care what you charge, which is letting the fox in the hen house to a certain extent, right? And so the first time they put a concert on sale, there'd be 75 operators sitting somewhere. And all of a sudden they went from selling 2% of the tickets to 40% of the tickets, or 35% of the tickets. And they go, wow, we didn't know all these people had phones. Hello? And credit cards, because don't forget, well, you wouldn't know this. In the early 80s, if you were breathing, credit card companies were sending you applications. And so credit cards just began to evolve. And there were phone rooms in New York, but there were almost none anywhere in the country. And so the opportunity presents itself. Walking into the opportunity, it's mixing opportunity with, how do I put it? with execution. Maybe that's the best way to put it. You say, listen, I got a system that can do this. I can do that. And then you had something else. How do you deal with multiple shows, things you never thought about? So you put a show on sale for an arena. You'd have ways of measuring activity. So if you're doing 1,500 tickets a minute, you could sell an arena out in 10 minutes, 12 minutes between phones and outlets. And then the agents and managers were on the phone and you go, listen, we're running the track at these numbers. We did a quick call at the outlets. The phones are sitting on X number on hold. You're going to roll into a second show? Yeah, let's roll into a second show. So multiple shows came from the knowledge they had from using the system effectively. Now, did I know that when I started? No. Did I make mistakes? Probably, maybe a lot, but I never made them twice. And, the question was, for whatever the reason, this business suited my personality. It suited who I was, and I was a quick learner. Because ultimately, what you did is the system solved, how do I put it? There was clearly a need. The industry didn't understand the need until they got it, and then they embraced it. Because if you did not embrace it, it would not have worked. And in the, I guess, 16 or 17 years I ran the company, I never lost a client. So little ones, yeah, because they always complain that they're not being taken care of. But the big arenas and the big theaters, they stayed with you all the time. And you would get some of this absurd. There is one funny story. So anybody here from Chicago? No. So you don't understand what the Cubs mean in Chicago. They're like a religion. So they had the first night game at Wrigley Field. And they decided the only way to put the tickets on sale, because to do it at the outlets would have created a crowd, was to put them on sale by phone. Okay? So whatever time it was, 6 o'clock or whatever it is. And I took my kids out for, I wasn't even thinking about it. I took my kids out for ice cream. I come back I am in LA, pick up the phone, some radio station disc jockey, and he goes, how does it feel to take down the 911 system in Chicago? I go, what are you talking about? He said, well, the Cubs went on sale tonight, yeah. And the system blew up, 911 didn't work and everything else. I go, well, I just took my kids for ice cream, so I can't possibly help you, but I'll make some calls. And by the way, we had 40 million attempts in the first 2.5 minutes. It blew up the system. And then when people say, I couldn't get through, well, yeah, there's thousands of attempts because you all learned about redial buttons. And in the end, a phone is a queue. And when you have trouble on the internet's a queue. You can't put 40,000 people for 10,000 seats into the queue at the same time. It doesn't work. And it gets repeated and repeated. And then you read the public goes, oh, I tried to get through and I couldn't get through. Well, guess what? Other people did. Anyway.
Yesterday, the Cubs, today, Hamilton. Same story.
Any other questions?
Hi, Mr. Rosen. I'm Jody Balsam. I'm a member of the faculty here and the advisor to the student group that's sponsoring this event. And I know that you left Ticketmaster. It's over 20 years now, and you've had so many fascinating projects and ventures since then. I was wondering if you could talk to us about one of those projects or ventures that brought you the most joy, that you had the most engagement with since you
You
left
mean
Ticketmaster.
since I left?
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of try to find humor in almost everything I did. One of the things that was somewhat bizarre was there were private equity group approached me about dealing with the midways on state fairs. And I thought that was nuts. But they said, look, we want to give you X amount of money and we can build another entertainment company of event-driven stuff. And we wound up doing, I mean, I took my wife to Mississippi, so think about that. She's been everywhere. But walking into a room, because we did the Calgary Stampede, which was truly remarkable in terms of what you saw and what you did, and recognizing what state fairs mean to this country. But you'd walk in a room and be $1 million in cash sitting on a table. Think about that, because it was all cash. The midways were cash. The food was cash. I managed to get these companies audited, and then the private equity guys ran out of money, so we sold it. But it was interesting in terms of dealing with these people, because it was like dealing with 1950 in America. I mean, it's all agricultural driven. The midways, which I called mobile amusement parks, you had great rides, you had great fun, you had great, food that you'd probably die from today. The joke was, we go to Calgary Stampede, and this really happened. So there's going to be slippage because people are handling cash. So one of the things was this fried donut thing, which you cannot comprehend how much money that made. I mean, it was like really scary. So there was 7 windows, and which the year before, everybody who worked the window got cash, and they would give the donuts. We figured there was too much money disappearing. So we created 2 windows on the left where you would come to buy a ticket, and then you go to the right, give the ticket to get the donuts. The day we did that, 90% of the people who worked the year before quit. They quit. They just said, we're not doing this. So that was kind of fun. I mean, when Comdex was alive before 9/11, I've done some of these different things that were interesting. The last thing I was doing was movies for the home, very expensive. There's a thing in Los Angeles called the Bel Air Circuit where you get first run movies if you're connected to the studio. So when movies come out, you can get them in your home. I've had the benefit of that for 25 years, and I thought I could find a way to monetize it, but COVID killed it. So, you're not right all the time, but I would tell you this, when I think about the arc of what I've done, what worked, what didn't work, I thought I could not have thought that would happen to me when I was sitting where you are. I think that's the key. And I want to read you one quote, if I can find it, that I think is really great, because in the end, some of you will have normal careers. Some of you will be successful. Some of you will have great lives, and a few of you will change the world. Because I always believe in a group like this should change the world. Now, I found this by accident, and it's a Steve Jobs quote, but I think it's appropriate. And I think to a certain extent, if you sit in a room and you're uncomfortable in your skin in that room because you see the world a certain way, this may be for you. And you all know who you are. This is a Steve Jobs quote that I think really fits. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or even vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius, because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. And I give you that philosophy because for those of you who dream, it's a great philosophy. And the answer is the only thing that prevents you from doing anything is yourself. And that's the drama, that's the game, that's the joy, and it's your fulfillment. It's everybody's journey is different. And to the extent that you can do that and live with, sometimes people are angry at you, sometimes people are mad at you, sometimes people don't like you. You wake up in the morning, it's not so bad. I did what I wanted to do. And if you can change the world, however it is, look at the internet, look at what happened, how that's evolved. Look at a lot of the wonderful things that have come from that. How you can sit there and consume content. When I grew up, if you missed Archie Bunker at 8 o'clock on Saturday night, you didn't see Archie Bunker. Now you can watch him on your big toe. I mean, the reality is you can do this any way you want because everything's at your fingertips. And sometimes you go home with all this programming and go, there's nothing on television. But that's the reality of change. And I hope you will change the world.
The end of the hour is drawing nigh. I want to ask one last brief question, which I will preface with some information. Because you've not only shared your time with us tonight and shared your experience, but you have also shared your treasure with Brooklyn Law School in offering a gift to create a scholarship whose recipient you have met. And so I wanted to just briefly ask you what inspired you to give back.
Well, first of all, I think there's something that everybody forgets. When you become successful, there are obligations you have. There are obligations you have to give back. There are obligations to be involved in charity in your community. Some people can do it with time. Some people can do it with money. Some people can do both. And I was thinking, because I'm going to be 78 next month, which is both good and bad, what I would like to do to honor my parents. And my parents were big advocates of me going to law school, probably bigger advocates than I was, to be candid. And my father missed most of my career because he passed away in 1970. And my mother complained about most of my career. She passed away 10 years ago. So it was a combination of two different people. But I thought in their memory that it would be, and I talked about this with my wife, which I think you do when you have someone you really care about and make decisions that are important, that I set up a scholarship here because I think it's a way of being respectful to them because they gave me the opportunity. And opportunities are, we all find them in different ways. On a certain level, I wish I could have shared a lot with my dad. I didn't get that benefit. So nobody, as we always say, gets out of this world with everything they want. But I thought if we could do this, if my wife and I could set this scholarship up, it would be a nice way of being respectful of my parents. And when I gave you the criteria at the beginning, everybody thought it was a little nuts because if you're in the top 25% of the class, you don't need my help. If you're in the bottom 25% of the class, good luck. And by the way, one of the worst students, I think, finished last in his law school, and this was Alan Grubman. And Alan is the biggest music lawyer, was the biggest music lawyer in New York, and he, graduated. As one of the great lines when he was trying to represent me, he took me to the Brooklyn Diner, and he said, "Look at this. They named a piece of chocolate cake after me." I said, "Alan, I like it when they name chairs for my lawyers, not food." So, but that was the reason we did it. And I met the young gentleman who won the scholarship, and I think it's appropriate. And now it's up to him to make his journey. So,
Well, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. Please join me in thanking